DA-led coalition has reclaimed the mayoral chain in the city of Tshwane. Cilliers Brink secured 109 votes, while his opponent, Ofentse Moalusi, recorded or received 102 yesterday. Brink says the council will now focus on delivering services and fighting corruption. Reaction for you now. Bring in the South African Local Governments Association's acting CEO, Lance Joel, who joins us via our video link this morning. Lance, it's lovely to see you. Thank you so much for making time to speak to us. You know, in the immediate aftermath or in the immediate reaction, Godrich Gardy, who's obviously associated with the EFF, tweeting that Cilliers Brink won't last. It gives us a sense that this is just a temporary reprieve and we're nowhere near seeing the kind of stability many people are hoping for in Tshwane.
Well, Ayanda, good morning to you and as well as the viewers. Well, certainly it is not news to us. We have predicted prior to the 2021 elections as SALGA that certainly we will see the increase in the number of collisions. And based on the experiences of the 2016 to 2021 term of office, we were predicting that we will see more instability in our municipalities because the experience has been the focus is on getting into and removing others from power instead of delivering on the election manifestos of political parties. So we're not surprised, but we are hoping that this is indeed an opportunity for the people of Tshwane to receive the services that they so dearly deserve.
Absolutely. So that's the diagnosis, but what does the prognosis look like? I mean, already there are calls, ironically, from some councillors themselves, that perhaps we should really, as a country, start thinking about legislating how coalitions should actually work. In other words, having legal, binding contracts that prevent councillors from having this revolving door because of conflicting political interests.
Well, exactly our view. And whilst when we developed a coalition framework to guide political parties, we also said that it's better to create certainty through a regulatory framework. And the opportunity is now for us as we move towards the next elections in 2026 to indeed come up with a regulatory framework that creates a bit more certainty, but more importantly, removes the popular item on the agenda with every single council meeting and allow an opportunity for some stability in the municipality. So we're certainly in agreement with a regulatory framework to guide the establishment of coalitions, but also the stability of coalitions.
Yeah. And who would be in charge of that? I mean, just from a logistics point of view, because if we can't get councillors to agree, for example, on who should be the mayor of the city, how on earth would we get them to agree on legislation that should govern who the mayor of the city should be?
Well, if it's national legislation, which is what we want, councillors are not the decision makers. It is our national party, both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces that would have to run a process of coming up with legislation. So only inputs that we will receive from councillors through SALGA, but necessarily it will be driven by Parliament itself.
And are we any confident that they'll get it right?
Well, we have seen in recent amendments to in particular local government legislation, Parliament getting it right through inclusive processes with all stakeholders by introducing necessary legislation at the local government level. And we do believe there's an opportunity for us because everyone would have the opportunity to participate in the process, make their contribution. So it's an all-inclusive process for all South Africans to be part of, although driven by Parliament itself.
Yeah. I suppose what we're also going to be wondering around this time is how much work councillors actually do in the running of cities. And this is not to minimize their role, but Tshwane is a great example. I mean, we've watched the back and forth for weeks, literally. And during that time, I imagine people were just getting on with their daily work, their daily activities, right? Not that I'm saying that we don't need the councils at all, but I mean, there is a question to be asked about the level of influence that these people have in these daily operations, because quite frankly, it doesn't seem like they've done much, at least in the first quarter of this year.
Well, I think that's the concern, and that's why the call for council to get all of the executive positions filled so that indeed they can play the role that they're supposed to play. And by the way, councillors do play a critical role in the delivery of services at the municipal level. Ultimately, they are the policy makers, they are the decision makers that would inform what would be implemented by the administration. And at this point, with the inability to adopt an adjustment budget, the administration is having difficulties in executing the programs for this year because they need funds to be allocated to those programs. So that's a particular example where a council plays a critical role in defining what should happen in the city to enable the administration to execute that. So they play a very critical role in our democracy. And we can't, unfortunately, we can't wish away councillors. They do have a critical role to play. And we see it quite well in many of the other municipalities. So indeed, the administration deals with the day-to-day delivery of services, but they also need to be guided from a policy and a decision-making point of view to execute their responsibilities.
Yeah. As we speak about legislation, I mean, one would hope that there is an incentive for councillors to get on with it as soon as possible. I mean, having these kind of protracted delays is not ideal at the very least. We then heard of Gauteng Treasury giving a deadline, for example, that the city's budget should be passed at a certain point. To what extent can that assist in kind of edging councillors on to do what needs to be done? Because for the first time ever probably this year, it looks like we really have a chance at getting this budget passed.
Well, certainly the due date for the passing and adoption of an adjustment budget is the end of January. That has passed nearly 2 months ago.
Right.
And we are aware that the administration led by the city manager has been interacting with National Treasury and Provincial Treasury to draw their attention to this difficulty that he has as the head of the administration. And we have seen them responding positively, accepting the current reality, and allowing a further opportunity to council to do that. So the opportunity is now to the newly elected executive mayor to lead that process of looking at the adjustment budget and bringing it to council for council's adoption. And we are hoping it is going to be an inclusive process so that it's an easier process to see the adoption of the adjustment budget, which will enable the administration led by the city manager to execute the programs that are remaining for this financial year.
Yeah. Speaking about inclusivity, often the president speaks about this idea of a social compact where essentially everybody in society will work together towards some kind of objective. Because of the mudslinging that's been taking place at a municipal level, it's easy to see how ordinary citizens may feel isolated from the work that takes place in council. And I wonder, SALGA, how worried you are about that, about how this affects not only democracy in this country, but the running of those municipalities.
Yeah, it's a concern to us within the context that a municipality comprises of its political leadership, the staff, and then the community.
Right.
So there's an obligation placed on the administration through the staff as well as the politicians through the councillors to engage on an ongoing basis with communities so that there's a better understanding of what the needs are and then responding to those needs. The absence of engaging with communities on an ongoing basis creates difficulties, creates space for conflict, and ultimately we will see people rising and seeing protests, and many of the protests have been informed by the lack of communication and interaction between the councillors, municipal staff, and the communities at large. So here's an opportunity for the remainder of this term, for this newly elected executive mayor, to engage more inclusively. And I know that he's made an undertaking to engage politically, and hopefully that will include engaging with communities that ultimately are the beneficiaries of services of the municipality.
Yeah, you had predicted that would get here. I wonder what your prediction is about what the future holds specifically for these municipalities.
Well, a reality that we can't wish away based on the trends is that collisions are here to stay, likely to increase with time. That's our prediction. That has been our prediction. And it's therefore necessary for us to ensure that there's appropriate guidelines. And here we're talking about a regulatory framework that would minimize the instability that flows from collisions. So we remain resolute that we have an opportunity to address the weaknesses. That opportunity is now, and we should use it now leading up to the 2026 elections, because post-2026, we may be in a more difficult position than what we currently are.
Sure. Hopefully we do make the most of that opportunity. Lance Joel, thanks for your time. Appreciate it as always. Lance is the CEO, acting CEO, of SALGA.